explaining that because he is a prophet of God, his heart is protected. So he goes blind in his physical body. When the rest of us get struck by grief, our heart goes blind. Our heart can no longer see. Our heart can no longer perceive. We are blinded by grief. Fear, in contradistinction, makes the heart deaf. You can no longer hear. You can no longer understand. So the stakes at purifying the heart from fear and grief is that it allows the heart to function as your principal organ of perception. Its senses work. It becomes seeing, it becomes hearing. It's difficult for us as modern Westerners to think about perception and cognition and understanding in the way that God does in the Quran. We think that we have a thing called a mind that orders our body, and that we have a body that is separate from the cosmos, that we are comprised of this divide. But in the Quran, your limbs know and see and hear and feel and speak. And the center of all that cognition, emotion, understanding, perception is your heart. When we talked about those four constituent parts of the human being, the qalb, the nafs, the ruh, and the body, so the spirit, the heart, the ego, and the body, the heart is the one that's meant to maintain the balance between all of them. It's your core. It's the center of you. That's why the Quran speaks to it so frequently. And not properly processing fear and grief caused that organ to become blind and deaf. Nothing gets in. You don't perceive and you don't understand. You don't process things anymore. You just begin to shut down as a person. The principal task of anyone who's trying to spread light, and in the Quran, it's the messengers are always sent to bring people min al-dhulumat ila-nur, from the darknesses into the light. Dhulumat is always plural in Quran. The darknesses are plural, the darknesses are many. We know that. Look around. But the light is always singular. So the people that are trying to bring people into darkness, or into light out of the multiple darknesses, the way that you do that is by, waking up people's hearts. You have to introduce a drop of moisture into a desiccated heart, a drop of tenderness, a drop of kindness, a drop of remembrance of God into a hard, desiccated heart until it starts to soften. Wake up that heart first. I mentioned a hadith before that it was said that the Prophet ﷺ used to teach us Iman before he taught Quran. I heard an exegesis of this where it was said that the Quran is knowledge, the Quran is light. But what good is light to a dead man? Light is something that you're supposed to see by. But if you're dead, you don't see. The first thing that you have to do is wake up the dead, then give them a light. We keep preaching things about our religion, trying to communicate knowledge and content to people whose hearts are suffering, whose hearts are broken and starting to shut down. Don't worry about that. knowledge. Introduce moisture first, tenderness. Help get through that hardening heart, that heart that is becoming covered over with dark spots, that's becoming covered over with hard parts. Find a way with a good word, with good nature, with good cheer, with kindness to pierce that stone, to get into the interior of that heart so that the light can start to reach that heart. Then the light will be some good. You keep shining, lights on rocks, and nothing's going to happen. It's not gonna do anything, because if even prophets of God have to contend with the consequences of fear and grief, what about the rest of us? We're walking around emotionally scarred and brutally damaged at all times. If we're not an aid and a mercy to the other hearts, we don't have anything to offer them. We don't have anything to offer them. So if you're blinded, by grief, if your heart has become deaf, with fear, find someone who will help you get out of it so that you can help somebody else out of it. I want to bring us back to our traits of character as a way of starting to close the afternoon discussion, and then I'll end with a small piece from the Sirah that is maybe my favorite story to tell about the transition to the Medinan period, which we'll be in tomorrow. So to begin, just to say a few words about where we were with Taqwa and Ihsan, so that we can kind of complete our understanding, or at least a provisional understanding of those. We talked about the balance of justice and pardon, that there are those two ayahs, one in Baqarah, one in Ma'idah, where it says, be just, that brings you closer to taqwa. Pardon, that brings you closer to taqwa. So you approach taqwa from these two, balancing justice with pardon, establishing a right so that you can then forego it for the sake of God, but not erasing the right. That ain't righteousness. Letting people stomp on you is not righteousness. Letting people continue to take ground from you until you are backed into a corner and have no choice but to swing is not righteousness. Yes, we are supposed to forgive, but we are not supposed to erase standards. You have a right to expect certain things from your spouse. You have a right to expect certain things from your parents. You have a right to expect certain things from your neighbor. You have a right to expect certain things from your government. You have a right to expect certain things from your society. We are a people of pardon. We are a people of forgiveness. We are a people of gentleness. But you have to first establish that you have rights in the first place before you can give them up for the sake of God. And if we use that as a model for how we navigate reverence, knowing that God has greater rights over us than we have over others, and that he's also more capable of forgiveness than we are, then that's going to keep us balanced in that state that leads to the next of those character traits, which is ihsan, which is the balance of hope and fear. The taqwa and ihsan are very closely related to one another. I want to say one thing about the opposite character traits, the ones that sit across from taqwa on the screen, because constantly in the Quran, udwan is coming as the opposite of taqwa, transgression. If taqwa is staying within the bounds, then udwan is going outside of them. That's it. And that comes in two forms. The opposite of that justice, of that order, of that society wherein people's rights are respected is jahiliyyah, where people just do whatever the hell they want. Pardon me for cursing. That they just take what they want when they want to take it. that they don't pay attention to anybody's rights. They don't have regard for anything. Law of the jungle. That was what the Prophet ﷺ, perhaps even more than shirk, had to fight against. The strong just simply eating the weak because they could. Our fight of taqwa in this time is the same fight. The strong are just eating the weak because they can. And because we are so disorganized, ridden with sin, unrecovered from the damage that we have suffered, we are incapacitated, incapable of offering solutions, incapable of offering guidance. We spend our time focused on identity politics instead of providing healing to the broader society. If we are just one identity group amongst many other identity groups, and we make up as Muslims perhaps 3-4% of the population, what sort of impact will we be able to make if our argument is that our special concerns need to be honored because of our identity, when there are larger groups that will make the same sorts of claims? In the Meccan period, that wasn't the way that the Prophet ﷺ transformed the society. It wasn't with numbers. There were 200 or 300 converts to Islam in the entire 10 years of the Meccan period. But the work that they did in introducing a new ethics, in introducing a new morality, in causing people to question the basis of the order that they had established, that's what allowed so many people to enter Islam just a few years later when he came back. If we do not serve as a beacon of ethics and of morality and of mercy, then we are simply going to be lost in a clamor of other voices who have greater claims to attention than we. This has to be a call that's rooted in Islam as a system of healing and religious meaning and ethics, not in Islam as an identity to be placed up against others. Otherwise, we cannot make an impact on this jahiliyyah in this time. As for stinginess, the reason why it's opposite the trait of pardon and foregoing one's rights is that stinginess is being exacting and demanding in claiming your right. I want everything that's coming to me. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is negotiable. That's bukhl. It's stinginess. There's an astonishing verse in Surah Tawbah coming at the very end of the Revelation in the Medinan period, where God explains, it's maybe, if somebody has Quran on their phone, it's maybe around 75, 77, somewhere in that ballpark in Surah Tawbah, so it's going to be like 975, something like that, where God says, he's talking about the previous religious communities, and they said that if I gave to them, God talking, if we gave them out of our bounty, they would be generous with it. And then we gave, and then they withheld. They were stingy. They had bukhl. So we punished them by putting hypocrisy in their hearts. Hypocrisy is not the sin itself. Hypocrisy is the payment for stinginess. When you withhold the bounties that God has given to you, then you incur wrath, because you are demonstrating in a basic way disbelief. You act as though what he's given you belongs to you when it does not. And you act as though if you gave it away, that he cannot replace it with that which is better. How many of us hoard good things, gather them around ourselves, protect them? The reason why I do talks like this is all, I told you how afraid I am of the American Muslim community. The reason why that I do talks like this is all is that I'm more afraid of God. I'm more afraid that he's going to try me for stinginess if I don't. That if I do think that there's benefit in these talks and I withheld it, from you, that he's going to call me to account for it. So it's about giving, knowing that God can give you better than that. Yes, you establish the right, and then you forego the right. Give up a portion of what you're due, knowing that God can give you back better than that. And if you give it up for his sake after you've already established justice, he for sure will give you back better than that. And it's a delicate balance to try to maintain, and it puts you on the road to ihsan, to spiritual excellence. Ihsan, the muhsinin, are the most frequently mentioned of the beloved groups in the Quran. Allah yuhibbul muhsinin. It's mentioned more than the others. And we talked about ihsan being comprised of that balance between fear and hope, which correspond to those categories of beauty and majesty, of transcendence and immanence. That hope in God's mercy and in God's generosity and in God's kindness can't be a blind hope. It can't be a false hope. The great scholar Shaykh Ibrahim Yas said, the difference between hope and false hope is that the first of them is accompanied by action. The difference between hope and false hope is that hope is accompanied by deeds. If you have hope for God's mercy, prove it by offering some good deed. If you want God to forgive you, repent and replace a bad deed with a good one. If you want something in this world to change around you, yes, pray for it. Yes, hope that God will provide deliverance. And then get up off your backside and go do something. Take action. Otherwise, hope is false hope. I was telling somebody during the break that a little over 3 years ago, I weighed 320 pounds. Okay? And battling obesity, and very ill health. And I made a supplication to God. I said, oh Allah, you made this body, you can restore it to fitness. If I could do it, I would have already done it. I wouldn't be in the kind of shape that I'm in. So I put my hope in Allah. And then I took my ass to the gym. Because if you ask at that level, it creates a binding obligation on the servant to take the steps that they know are required for the fulfillment of the prayer. Don't ask God to do it for you and then sit waiting for him to get it done. God didn't just restore me to fitness, he took years off my life. Hopefully, inshallah, we don't gain another 100 pounds. The point is that action is the price that we must pay for the fulfillment of the hope. It's for sure God that will bring it. It'll come in a form that you didn't expect. It won't be the outcome exactly as you designed it, but you need to expend the effort. You can't just leave it all to him. If you want him to do it, then that means you need to be willing to try as well. And that takes us to the character trait that sits opposite hope in the first place, which is that despair, which we talked about earlier, is always leading you to inaction. Despair paralyzes you. The shaitan wants you paralyzed, incapacitated, immobilized. He's always trying to keep you from engaging in meaningful activity. He's always trying to keep you from becoming what you really are, because he knows that if you get free from your prison and you get any one of those traits written for you, you become a danger to him. By the way, when we talked about the progression through the nafs, the shaitan, hawa, dunya, as soon as you get on the road to purifying your nafs and you have a teacher, the shayateen are coming. Just know that that's the moment that they're going to come the hardest. That's when he's going to expend the most resources on you, because as soon as you start to get free from that prison of your nafs, you're potentially a threat. So he's going to throw shayateen at you. You better be ready to call on your Lord. You got to be pulling them things off of you one by one, one by one, day by day. They are coming. They are coming. Can I get an amen from like, I know that's right. So one of the forms that takes is despair. In Surah Al-Hadid, we're going to talk about this in more detail tomorrow, but God says about the hypocrites that you allowed yourself to be deceived by the deceiver about your Lord. Shaitan, misguides us about who God is. Magnifying, as we said, God's mercy to incite us to sin, and then magnifying his majesty once we've crossed the line, and scaring us away from repenting. He doesn't want us to go back and ask for forgiveness. He wants to leave us in despair. He wants to leave us in hopelessness the same way that he's in despair and in hopelessness. Whatever that thing is, don't give up hope in God. He can still fix it. It's not over yet. You're still drawing breath. You've got another day. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, all of the inhabitants of the graves long for the same thing. One more day in which they could accomplish some beneficial deed that would help them where they are now. When I heard that hadith for the first time, I was a teenager. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I've got the thing that every single human being that has ever lived and died would give up anything that they ever owned to possess. I have today. I have today. I can take some action today. I can send forth something for myself in this next life that will undo some of the crazy stuff that I was doing a couple of years ago. I was a teenager at the time. Yeah. Don't even get me started on the crazy stuff we did as teenagers. It's a miracle we survived. It's a miracle we survived. Take some kind of action. Don't give in to the despair. Get up. Send something ahead for yourself. Accomplish some good deed, no matter how small. And pray for the day and hope in the day when you cross that Sirat al-Mustaqim, that you find your deeds stacked in front of you like a mound of dates that reaches to the sky. Send forth provisions for yourself. Those deeds are the fruits of paradise. Prepare your provisions. Don't give in to despair. If God loves the people of Ihsan, he does not love the Zalimeen, the oppressors. He does not love the people that oppress other people. We already talked about this a bit, but amongst the category of supplications that are always accepted is the supplication of an oppressed person against their oppressor. And it does not matter the faith of the person that makes the supplication. Any oppressed person who prays against you for oppressing them, that prayer will be answered. I think that I might not have said this to the whole group. I think I only said it at lunch yesterday. So I'll just share it with the whole group, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But I was asked to make a khutbah at the University of Michigan after two sisters, Muslim sisters, were threatened by two white kids that they would burn them alive if they didn't remove their headscarves. This was right after Trump was elected. So I gave the khutbah to try to offer whatever I could to the community at that time. But I had given a few khutbahs earlier the previous year when black kids were getting gunned down in the street every day. And I told the predominantly Desi and Arab Muslim Students Association and the other people that attended that mosque, I said, look, a day is coming where you're going to want my people standing by your side. And if you're not standing by our sides when we're getting gunned down in the street, don't expect me to be standing with you when your day comes. Don't think that your La ilaha illallah and Muhammad Rasulullah is going to protect you on the day of judgment if you're not standing with my people when we're being murdered and oppressed. If you do not stand with the Bani Israel of this country while we're being hunted in the streets, then prepare to be counted amongst the people of Pharaoh. Prepare to have a flood wash you away. If you are an instrument of oppression against any human being, prepare your soul. That is how seriously God takes oppression. It is one of only two things in which he has limited himself. He has forbidden oppression upon himself. Therefore, he is never the source of any wronging of anyone or anything. You wrong only yourselves, the Quran repeatedly says. The only other limitation that he applied to himself is Inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. He enjoined blessing the Prophet upon himself. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This matter of social justice that we take as a political or sociological issue has the most dramatic of religious consequences. Oppression is extraordinarily serious in the eyes of God, precisely because human beings have such value in the eyes of God. Go back to that fundamental investment that God has in humanity in the first place, and you will understand why it is a crime to participate in oppression at any level. One of the first things that happened to me when I went to Senegal for the first time in 1996, I got there at the time of the Eid. And at the Eid, there's a mutual exchange of greetings that takes place. The first person speaks to every neighbor, every person that they encounter on that day, and says, Dewaneti, which means Happy New Year. Because every time you celebrate an Eid, it means that the year's gone by. So you say Happy New Year. So Dewaneti, Happy New Year. And the response is Fekel Dewan, which means be there next year. Happy New Year. Be there next year. Like, let's live till next year. I'm praying that you live to see the next one, just like I'm praying it for myself. So dewanati fekel dewan. And then you say bal ma'ak, which means forgive me any right that you have over me. Forgive me any wrong that I've done you. And then the next speaker says, Balna la bal ma'ak. I have forgiven you, now you forgive me. And then you say together, Yalnanya yala bole bal. May God forgive us together. I was there 2 weeks, and I was asking, what is this thing that people keep saying to each other? And then a friend of mine explained it to me, and I was like, that's beautiful. Like, where does that come from? And he said, human beings are the only thing keeping human beings out of the garden. He said, God forgives every sin that the servant commits against him as soon as they ask, because it costs him nothing to forgive those sins. He is the forgiving, he is the merciful. You haven't wronged anybody but yourself in the sin that you commit against God. You haven't harmed God. So what does it cost him to forgive you? He's forgiving, he's merciful. But then he said, but the catch is that he's the just. Al-Adil, he's the just. His esteem for human beings is such that he will always give justice to human beings when they claim it against one another. And it's for this reason, he's forbidden oppression upon himself. So therefore, he will give every last one of his servants the justice that they claim. It's the reason why the scene of judgment unfolds the way that it does in an Islamic understanding, is that you're judged for your deeds, but then if you have wronged others, they begin to take your good deeds away from you, until your good deeds are all gone because of the wrongs that you did to other people. And then when you have no more good deeds for them to take because of the measures of the wrong that you did against them, then they start piling their bad deeds on you. All that charity that you gave, all that prayer that you did, all of those good things that you accomplished, watch them stripped away from you in the measure of your oppression. So that's the beauty of the greeting that they give. Wipe my slate clean, and I'll wipe yours clean. And then God will forgive us all together, and we all go to the garden. Stop holding grudges against one another. Ask for forgiveness for the thing that you did, that you wronged your neighbor. Forgive that thing that they did to you, in the hopes that someone else will forgive you for a wrong that you did against them on that day. But the truth of the matter is, that we will be one another's primary obstacles on that day if we don't learn to love and forgive one another. In Surah Luqman, as we mentioned before, God said, indeed, your creation and your resurrection is none other than that of a single soul. We're all connected. The fate of every single human being is tied to every other human being. That balance of hope and fear, as we mentioned before, should keep us in a productive tension. Always hoping for God's mercy, but never feeling like we're safe. Never feeling like we're safe. So that each day we take some other action to help our situations out, to send something a little more ahead for us. As soon as you think you're safe, you're for sure not. As soon as you think that you've acquired some kind of spiritual station, know that you've lost it. I'm going to stop at this point so that we have questions not just on this section, but on the whole day. And then I'm going to send you away with just a few words from Baqarah and from Ali Imran that will transition us in tomorrow. So we'll take about 20, we're going to go to 4:15. So we'll take maybe 30 minutes for Q&A, and then I'll just take 5 minutes at the very end to set us up for tomorrow. Do you guys need coffee? Is everybody getting sleepy? Do we need to get up and stretch and do calisthenics? All right. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I just simply wanted to ask, in terms of